I am your singing telegram.
Welcome to the Clue episode. We needed to start with the singing telegram because she's my all-time favorite part of this movie. Well, yeah, I think close. Maybe
It's a close tie between the singing telegram bang and flames on the side of my face.
Flames on the side of my face.
Clearly. That's one of my favorite parts.
We're sorry in advance, movie lovers. If this was not one of your favorite movies, this is not the episode for you because Nat and I are both diehard fans of this one. So yeah. we're gonna dive in. Rewatching this one yet again. I've seen this movie probably 150 times, even very recently. But it's up there. I think it's in my top 3, maybe in my top 5. I still need to just sit down and force myself to actually choose a top 3 and a top 5 favorite movies, but it's here. And Paul in our studio audience says the moral of this movie is that you don't want to be a singing telegram. Correct. Yeah. You definitely don't want to be a singing telegram, or really you don't want to be in the game of Clue at all, ever.
You don't want to be anywhere near Hill House, which I feel like if you're in a movie and there's a house on a hill, no, just go in the opposite direction. I feel that's just a staple for most movies.
Yeah. Although, we said that, and at the same time, I'm like, but I really would like to go to a party at that house. It's just really would I'd like to be there. But just maybe I before everyone else because I want to be there with the actors. I just love this crew so much. They're the perfect ensemble cast. All of them are so good. I can't even pick a favorite. They're all so good.
So the quick premise of this movie, it's based on the game Cluedo, or in North America, Clue. Mm-hmm. It basically, these different guests are all invited mysteriously to a dinner party in 1958. And they all have these invitations that don't really have a lot of information, but they know they're going to be given aliases. They're greeted at the door by a butler, played by Tim Curry. And one of my favorite lines, who are you? I'm the butler. What do you do? I buttle. So he greets them at the door. He's like, tonight you'll be called Mrs. White, Mr. Green, Mrs. Peacock, etc. All of the game piece characters are in the game. All of the rooms and the weapons from the board game are in the movie.
Yep.
And they sit down for dinner. After dinner, they are given the next step of clues from their host, who's not at the party. They don't know who the host is.
Mr. Body.
Well, they think it's Mr. Body, but then they find out Mr. Body is actually leaving. No, he is actually also a guest. And then hijinks ensue. The lights go out. People die. The bodies keep piling up. The police are coming. The FBI are coming. Homeland Security, international spy rings, communists, etc. And that's basically the movie.
So we were talking right before we jumped on for this podcast, as we always are. And you know what? We should record these, but we're not going to. So, we'll give you updates of our behind the scenes. But we did not know until fairly recently that the board game Clue, which came out in the late 40s, 1949, was released, was actually originally called Cluedo and is still called Cluedo everywhere except for North America. So if you didn't know that, it apparently is a combination of the words clue and ludo, which means I play. So and you know what? I don't know why Parker Brothers was just like, no, we're just gonna go with Clue. We're gonna go with Clue, and that'll be better.
America's like, no, too complicated for people to know a word.
Too complicated. And then another a personal fun a personal fun fact about this game and this movie. So I just moved to a new incredibly old house, not as cool as the house in this movie, but up there. And about a little bit less than a year ago, and Nat had the genius idea, or we collaborated on a genius idea, because this house has
I saw her Zillow listing and I was like, there's a conservatory.
There's a screened-in porch that we have renamed the conservatory, and it is Clue themed. So if you are listening right now or watching and you're not yet following our Instagram channel, because I am such a dork, I will do a video tour of my Clue-themed conservatory for you, and you can ask questions and be involved in the experience. But you have to be over on our Instagram, so you have to look up the VHS Club Pod on Instagram, follow us, and you will unlock the ability tomorrow to see me tour my conservatory. But yeah, apparently, first fun fact of the night is that this movie is the first movie to be based on a board game. It's unfortunately not the last. There have been a lot of very terrible board game movies, most recently ending in Battleship, which I have not seen, but I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah, I don't think I really need to. But this one worked really well. Not in the theater. No one in the theater liked it. People hated this movie in the theater.
Really?
Yep, it didn't perform well at all. It had a $15 million budget, and I think it made about $3 million. In the opening weekend.
Because this movie is so funny. So for comedy, it has a little bit of everything. It has a running gag, which I love, a good running gag. It has slapstick comedy. It has wit, banter, puns, wordplay, like just throughout the whole, it's just this very unique mix of all these different types of comedy well put together in one space, because it's like, it seems like those types of comedy don't always go together. It's hard to get them to go together, but they did it so well. I can't believe this movie didn't do well.
Well, it did. It is similar to The Princess Bride and a number of movies.
The Princess Bride didn't do well?
The Princess Bride also didn't do well in the theater. Yeah, right? So these movies like came out in the theater and like didn't really have an audience. And The Princess Bride was a similar story, where it was like not really made for any one specific like avatar, we would call it in the marketing world. But so it didn't so it was hard to get people to go see it in the theater. In the case of Clue, they actually recorded four completely separate endings. They scrapped one of them. So there was one ending where the butler did it, which would have been great, but I guess they got rid of that one, and they kept 3 endings. And they actually, which I think is genius, I just love this. They randomly released a different version to different theaters. So you could have been Nat and I could have been watching one movie with one ending in Montreal, and Doc could have been watching a completely different ending to the same movie in Hawaii. And they just didn't tell anyone that. Incredible. They were just different endings. And then I guess when it was released
What's wild about that is there was no common use of the internet. So
no.
It's not like people could have gone online and see the other endings. You would have lived your life until Blockbuster rentals came out for you to know that there were different endings.
Well, and I think that's what was great about it. So I definitely did not see this in the theater, which I'm really bummed about. But I saw it obviously on either VHS or DVD, probably VHS. And what's cool about it is when they did the VHS release, they put all 3 endings on. So now there's this really comical, silly ending where it was like, well, that's what could have happened, but here's what might have happened. Kind of continues on. And so I wonder, like, if that mixed with kind of just like people discovering it, whether they were like watching it on TV or they, the made for TV version, or they were going to, to Blockbuster or to the video rental stores and getting it, and kind of the word of mouth, just like obsessive cult following grew. And so it has made all of the money since, and has been a huge success since. Yeah. And Princess Bride was the exact same. And there's a few others where it was just, it took a little while, and the popularity of movie rentals and kind of the Friday night movie night culture that came up in the 80s and 90s really carried these movies through. So kind of neat. I don't know. I think it's kind of fun that they were brave enough to do something like that. And even though it failed, it still won. And I just love that. Yeah. I think it's great.
So I have to say, for me in this movie, because all of the actors are extremely strong, they play their characters super well. Like Mrs. White is just brilliant.
So good.
I mean, everybody, Colonel Mustard and his bumblingness and his back and forth with Butler, Tim Curry, Wadsworth. And I mean, all the characters are just phenomenal. But I find that Wadsworth the Butler is played by Tim Curry, is sort of the anchor in this. Like he's the narrator, if you will. He's the one who's sort of getting everybody in, telling them what's happening. You know that he's not trustworthy fairly early on. Like, he's not a great narrator in this because, I mean, he could say whatever he wants. Like, he's saying, oh, your host. It's like, well, it's you, isn't it? Or is it? No, it's not. Maybe it's Mr. Body. No, he's now dead. It was never him. It's crazy. And one of my favorite things that he does is at the end when he's like, I know what happened, and let me tell you how.
Yeah.
He does this madcap where the whole cast of characters that are still living are running around with him through the house as he's going through the whole evening. So he's like, I greeted so-and-so at the door and I brought them to the study. And then I'm greeting so-and-so at the door and brought them to the study. And Yvette brought them and he talks so fast. And he does this whole comedic sort of retelling of everything that happened, or as we see with the several endings, could have happened. And he even does, as you had pointed out to me, like he does this thing where he mimics the other
actors' voices,
the other
characters' voices, yeah.
And even the sound effects in it, he's like, and then Miss Scarlet came in and Yvette handed her a glass of champagne and she smiled and was like, zing! And you hear like and he had this manic grin on his face when you hear the zing, and it was just so, I loved it. That scene kills it for me every time.
Yeah, and again, like we watched this when we were kids, somewhere between kids and teens, right? And watching this even with my kids now, who are just about 9 and 12, like it's that energy and that kind of like manic, crazy, slapsticky like run through of the plot for anyone who missed the story and was too busy paying attention to the actors. This person here, like that is hilarious for everyone, but definitely for any kids or people that are younger that are watching. Like there's something about him like throwing the other characters around and they're like, hey, it's like disarming and funny and silly, and like for moments takes you away from the fact that like people have actually died in this house, and it's just this like it just comes across as being this like very silly fun whodunit, and you're caught up in the like who actually did this, and and kind of yelling out. If you've watched this in the group, it's like yelling out your guesses out loud to each other and kind of laughing together, and it's a great one to watch in a group. It's a great one to watch. It's similar to like Hocus Pocus or some of the other ones we've talked about recently. Yeah. This is like it is a cult classic. It is one that is very fun to watch on a regular, like every year with a group, like while playing Clue. Yeah. Like go ahead, treat yourself to like a ridiculous games night, movie night crossover, and just like really go for it, because it holds up. It's always fun. I've done it a number of times and it's just always a blast. Everyone has a great time just getting really silly with this one.
One of the things I found really clever about this movie, the script, was they made all of the characters, so they're all invited to this dinner because they find out what they have in common is that they're all being blackmailed.
Yeah.
So none of the characters are redeemable, really. All of them could be the killer, and then if one of them dies, it's not necessarily Like, well, they were all terrible people in their own ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I love by the end of it, they're all so stressed out, all these dinner guests. They're all so fed up in bodies, and they keep getting locked in things, and the power keeps going out, and people keep dying. And when they find the last two bodies, they find the maid. She got strangled by the rope in the billiard room, and they see
And
her body, and they're just like, they don't even react. They're just
no,
like, oh.
they
And
just
then they
kind of
go
walk
to
into
the
the other
other
room.
room,
Yeah.
and they see a police officer who came in to use the phone is stabbed or bludgeoned in his head, and they're like, huh. And then they go on about discussing who might be the killer because they're just like, whatever at this point. They're like, oh, good. Like, this is our sixth body. It's just, I
Yeah.
thought, yeah, that really cracks me up. I love how they do it and how they portray that, and it's funny. And every time the doorbell rings, except for the singing telegram, you see the whole group of them go to answer the door. So there's Tim Curry, the butler, and then they're all standing behind him, like, yes, hello. And the person, whoever rings the door, is like, I immediately feel uncomfortable.
I do. I think one of my so other than flames on the side of your face, which if you've not seen this movie, you should just search that clip to watch it. Classic Mrs. White. So my in order, that's my favorite moment. My second favorite is the singing telegram because it's always funny, no matter how many times you've seen it. But I would say my third favorite is like a combination of the things that Mr. Green says because he is deadpan as he says all of them, and they are so funny, and they get funnier the more times you've seen it and the older that you get. Like there's so he is, as he calls it, a homosexual. The way he says it is fantastic, and which, you know, in the 50s was not what it is today, unfortunately. But he, you know, so he's fantastic. So he announces that, like, to disarm and kind of take away from the blackmail of the entire situation. And then later in the movie, you have the like hot French maid Yvette, who is like, you know, needs someone to go with her to like a different part of the house. And all of the men are like, sure, no problem. Yeah, I'll go with you. And Green in the background is just like, no, thank you. It's just like quiet. It's wonderfully funny. And then you have a scene later with him where
he ends up going with her. So they all split up into pairs to investigate the house to see if they can find clues as to who the murderer is.
Yeah, it's fit. And then my other favorite moment with Green is where they go to the door. I think it's like the second or third, like random but not random person that shows up to this house, and they open the door, and everyone is like, you know, it was like, can I come in? And everyone's like, no, and Green is like, yes. Like, and everyone is saying the opposite, and he's just like, sure. His like, again, just sort of deadpan reactions. It's just great acting, and it's great writing, and it's really fun. I'm looking at Susan. Hey, Susan, thanks for hanging out with us tonight in the studio audience. Susan says it's a great movie, but you really have to track what's happening. Yes, I like Nat said this at the beginning. Absolutely. Yeah, they do, but it reminds me a little bit of one of our like favorite comedy shows, Arrested Development, in that it's so layered that you can watch this movie and that show multiple times and find something new in it that's funny, which is absolutely the case for this movie.
We see in this movie, like, you come into the house, you're greeted by the butler, he brings them to, so all of the rooms, like, to the study, and of course, like, there's the secret passageways, and then, like, you see, so all the rooms are sort of shown, they mention the name of all of the rooms in, like, sort of the order they are on the game board, so that's pretty.
Yeah, they go in order, and the floor is like, if you are watching really carefully, these are all facts that I read over the last few days, but the floor in the movie of this actual mansion, so it's an actual mansion they filmed in, not a movie set, but the floor mimics the board of the game. Like, it's really intricate how they set this up, and the set design of this, and kind of how they approached all of it. Even the characters who are colors, right? You have Peacock and Plum and Scarlet. Their cars, as they're driving to the house at the beginning, are the same color as their characters, and their clothing is the opposite of what their colors are, which is just awesome.
Like Mrs. White, when she walks in, she's in all black. She has a cape, and when she opens it, it's all white silk inside. Mrs. Peacock has like feathers on her fascinator.
Yeah.
Miss Scarlet has red lips. It's
Mm-hmm.
like they all have these little things that show who they are. The Professor Plum has his pipe. He smokes his pipe, which on the like original game pieces, he has a pipe.
Yep.
And also like so as we're meeting these characters and they're all coming together, we see that they're giving clues as to who they are and what their blackmail is. Like we find out pretty much immediately when we come upon Miss Scarlet that she is a brothel owner
Mm-hmm.
or runs like a high escort service
Mm-hmm.
type thing out of Washington, so for politicians,
As you
and
do. Yeah.
as one does. And but so it's like all these little things. Yvette leans over with her large bosom to serve them at the table, and she's like, "Oh, I will keep something warm for him." And she's like, "I'm sure you will." And so she makes all these little sort of jokes and innuendos um, that give hints to who she is, and all the characters sort of do that.
Yeah.
What I find it, except for again, Mr. Green, because he's a little more.
Yeah.
We don't really know who he is until the very, very end, possibly because it's only one of the endings. So we're never really sure who he is.
I do. So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this, sorry, you're in the wrong place. But at the very so there are three endings that are actually like shown in the film in the now version that we see in the theater. It was all individual, but and so it goes the first one is Scarlet. This is the killer. The second one is Peacock is the killer, and the third one, it's everyone except for Green. So it is like you said. I think
He's
yeah,
undercover FBI.
and the butler. But so maybe that's a little bit why like his character is kind of like he's the first one to sort of immediately tell you the facts to get that out of the way for his blackmail. So like no one else admits to anything, and he's just like, here's what they're blackmailing me about. But then you
And
don't
as
really
the police are showing up too, he's like, "I want to tell the cops," and everybody's like, "No," and he's like, "Yes."
so even just remembering it makes me laugh. You don't really learn a lot about him other than what he is sharing to release himself from the kind of pressure of being blackmailed.
Yeah.
So, and you don't, again, in that final version of ending, none of that is true anyway, because he's not like, he wasn't being blackmailed. He's an FBI agent who's there to try to catch the killer. So it makes it really, really fun to like, again, it's I think we're in a day and age where movies like this like will continue to get more and more popular, even though this one is very dated. Like this one is like definitely set in like a particular era, and it is very dated. It's still popular because it plays into this whole like true crime whodunit mystery craze that we're all still swept up in right now, where it's fun to guess who the killer is. It's fun to kind of have it shift and change. And I think even though, not a lot of, if any movies have done this kind of multiple different ending gimmick, I think it's really fun and holds up.
I know in our live audience there has been some mention of some recent whodunits that I have opinions about. I'm sorry, they're not on my potato list. Because I find they just don't do this. They don't do what Clue does.
Yeah.
They drop the ball quite a bit and I'm like, I mean, I go in watching the whodunit hyper aware. I'm trying to absorb.
Nat's too smart for these. So.
No, it's not that I'm too smart. It's that I'm like hyper observant when I turn it on.
Yeah. I love all of them because I don't pay any attention.
The Last of Sheila too. The Last of Sheila was a great whodunit.
Mm-hmm.
And I find one thing that movies do a little more now is they put almost too much into it, so they let things slip, and I don't know if it's outside opinions when they're doing final edits that they have to cut things to make it more enjoyable for the audience, or is it that they think the audience is too dumb to get it? Because I mean, granted, when Clue was released, obviously in theaters it didn't appeal to the masses, right? It didn't appeal to everybody. Well, so are movies nowadays just trying to like make it easier, more palatable? So anyways, I find the whodunits are always going to be a desired format of film, but I question whether it's been done well lately.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, so in this particular one, the it did, and I think I don't know if all movies go through this or if it's just like some percentage of movies, maybe over a particular budget, but it did go in front of test audiences, and they actually changed some of the movie and some of the ending in one of the endings include based on the feedback from the test audience. So I like originally in the Miss Peacock Did It ending, she runs outside and the like man of the prophet that shows up that turns out to be part of the FBI shoots and kills her. And they were like, oh, that's too dark for this movie. So they just
really the movie with all the bodies.
Apparently
the murderer to get killed.
Apparently it was too dark and didn't test well with audiences, so they ended up cutting it and adding in what you see now. But if you look closely, which I learned this fact before I rewatched it tonight, but if you look really closely, the guy's gun is still smoking even though he hasn't fired it at her, because they just cut it out that way. So like I think what works well with this movie in the context of what you just said about kind of the modern take on movies is that this one is already so somewhat confusing and through the eyes of like as you said, like an unreliable narrator, that they actually have a little bit more permission to make mistakes or leave like issues or errors in, because in the end we don't really know who did it. It could have been one of those three endings. There's not like one official ending. And I feel like the modern movies that have done it well are the ones like almost like the first Scream, where it's more than one person, which then gives a little bit more permission where you're like, oh, okay, like that, like, because as you're watching it, you assume, before obviously you've seen a movie like Scream, but you assume it's just one killer. So you're tracking all the way through to see like, who's not there, who's like, who looks suspicious. But if you have two different killers or three different killers, or like Clue, it's everyone except for one, then you like, it's a little bit easier to justify to pull the story together in a way that's effective.
Yeah. I mean, they do have, like, kind of the framework for this is, like, the Wilkie Collins. I'm talking about writers. So Wilkie Collins did sort of the first murder mystery. He's attributed to the first murder mystery novel. Agatha Christie, obviously. And, like, the whole whodunit thing is very Poirot.
Yeah.
Mind you, I think the modern day Poirot movies, because Kenneth Branagh has taken very wide strokes with interpreting the texts in previous film, very, very wide stroke. They're terrible. Katie loves them. I'm like, really? Branagh? Like,
I will
Emma
say,
Thompson, you cheated on her. I can't forgive you.
In my defense, I love them. I don't think that they are good, quote unquote.
Okay, that's
I love Agatha Christie stories so much that no matter what version is put in front of me, there's like an excitement about, and this is comical, but I'll just admit this, right? I never ever ever know who did it. Even when I've read the book and know who did it, I'm like still like trying to remember who did it, even though it's preposterous and I know who it is. So they're like, I just like get so swept up in the story, and Agatha Christie was such a fantastic writer that I'm just like, yay, I'm in it for like a modern, like I'm in it for like the quality of the movie, not the like acting of the movie, but just like the beauty of the beauty of the movie, right?
They
like
are beautiful. The sets are beautiful. The costumes are beautiful.
Yeah.
The people are pretty to look at, even if they're not doing a good job.
Well, Nat, I need to say,
this movie again. We're not talking about this movie.
No,
this movie was brilliant.
But we need to take a moment because Val is late, so we need to give her a moment of shame. All I have is applause, Val. So we'll applause for you. Oh no, it's turned way down. One sec. There we go. Yay, Val's late. No, but all joking aside, Val, welcome. What I was gonna call out was that there were a bunch of people in the audience who were talking about how fantastic you look because you are in costume. You are Mrs. Whiting it up. I assume you're close. You're close. The closest to Mrs. White. Okay, good.
Well, I'm wearing a hat and pearls and
black. Yeah. So yeah.
As Mrs. White does.
You have to do flames on the side of your face. Oh, absolutely.
So the singing telegram was what, a guitarist for the Go-Go's?
The guitarist for the Go-Go's. Yep.
today, which unlocked as like, oh, I knew that a million years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was fun. And the Mr. Body
Mm-hmm.
was also a musician. He was what, in a metal band? Was he a rock band?
Yeah, I can't
I
remember.
recognize him only as an actor. I can't remember the name of the band, but apparently he was in a band.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm trying to scroll through so I can find it quickly, but go ahead,
I
continue
I
on.
recognized him from a movie that nobody's heard of because it was famously one of the biggest bombs in Hollywood history, which was called "The Streets of Fire: A Rock and Roll Fable,"
Mm-hmm.
starring Michael Paré, Diane Lane, and Willem Dafoe. I love that movie because it's so camp, but it's pretty awful. But I know he's in that movie, so I've seen him in a few things. Um,
Oh, I love it.
yeah. Um,
I
no,
love
this
it. All
movie
right.
also, Tim Curry at the time was so famous. Like when we were kids and we saw this movie, we were like, oh yeah, he's that famous guy. He's in
He
everything, and then he
he
was in
wasn't
everything preceding this too.
he wasn't famous though when this came out. He was famous like when we watched it. So it
Well,
is an
yes, we would have
interesting.
probably watched it early '90s, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so this is going to blow everyone's mind about Mr. Body, or at least it blew my mind. So,
Cool.
and we have the sources for all of these in the show notes. So don't get angry at us, people from these famous publications that are obviously watching the show. It says Mr. Body was played by Lee Ving, the lead singer of the punk rock band Fear. There you go, Nat. While Ving had some acting experience prior to Clue, he was cast on the basis of his stage name. That is, Mr. Body is Lee Ving. Get it? Mr. Body is leaving. As a direct clue to the movie's plot. I have no idea if that's an accurate fact or not, but I desperately want it to be because it just made me so happy. I was like, "Oh my goodness,
That's fantastic.
his name is leaving. His name is leaving." I thought it was fantastic. And it is like, again, like as like rewatching it with my kids just like reminded me of how fun it was to watch it when I was a kid, where they're like, his name is Mr. Body. He's the body in the game. Like, it was like the obviousness of this, and yet just the silliness of it is just fantastic, and like holds up. I just think it's great. I
Yeah.
think it's awesome. Yeah, Susan's got it before I even have it. Mr. Body is leaving. So good.
Absolutely.
Absolutely amazing. Might be, as Doc says, one of the best names in showbiz. Yeah, it oh gosh, I have nothing but I'm sorry to everyone who doesn't like this movie, the 4 of you that exist in the world, but there's nothing bad I can say about this one. It's just every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, I love that. I forgot how much I love this movie.
I love how Tim Curry and Colonel Mustard keep doing this sort of loop. Like it's one of the running gags in the movie is Mr. or Colonel Mustard will ask him a question and Wadsworth will answer it, but almost in a question, like not like directly. He's directly answering it, but in such a way that it can be misinterpreted.
Yep.
And they just keep doing it over and over until like every time they end up getting caught in that loop, somebody's like, shut up. That's that's definitely one of my favorite bits too.
Yeah,
Also at the beginning when Tim Curry comes in, he throws these two like German shepherds that seem slightly rabid. They're out in the pouring rain, mind you. He throws some of these big stakes and then he seems to step in some dog poop and he scrapes it off outside on the boot. Like, I don't know anybody who has it anymore, but there's like these boot brushes.
The boot brushes outside your mansion, obviously.
He's scraping his shoe on a boot brush, and every time he walks into a room at the beginning or sees a new character at the beginning of the movie, they're always like, oh, like they smell like the dog poop and they keep checking the bottom of their shoes. And it's like all those little bits I like.
Yeah, or the joking off of the word body. So it's like there's, a bunch of times where it's like, who's in here? They're like, nobody's in here. There's nobody here. It's just, there's something about the layers of it. Nobody is here. What about a body?
Body's here. Yeah. I also love, so when the police officer comes in and he's like, can I use the phone? And they're like, no. And Mr. Green is like, yes. But so they don't want him to come in because they don't have an available phone, because the police officer went to use one phone and he got whacked. And then another person whose car broke down, which we later find out that the police was on the take for Miss Scarlet, and the other guy.
Yeah, they're all involved. Yeah.
He was also like somebody's informant. He also gets whacked in the other room with the phone. And then they had moved all of the bodies into the study. So there's, at this point, the police officer, the broken down car, the maid, and the chef. Is that all the bodies? And Mr. Body. So there's 5 bodies.
And Yvette eventually, and the singing telegram
the
eventually.
Police officer, not yet. So the police officer is looking, and he's going into the rooms, and they have to sort of position, like they have to manipulate the bodies to make it look like these people are alive or passed out drunk, and they're doing all these things like Colonel Mustard and Mrs. White are pretending to make out like in the curtains by the window, but it's the chef's dead face looking at the cop. It's it's a very madcap.
It is a madcap
sort of thing. And
yep.
Another thing with Tim Curry not being a great, like he's an untrustworthy narrator in this, is there's a scene where they decide to split up and investigate the house to see if they can find clues. And he's like, okay, we're going to draw matchsticks, and whoever has like matching lengths of sticks will go to. So shortest starts in the basement, longest goes to the attic, and we're going in pairs. And he could have picked whatever he wanted because he's cutting them, he's measuring them. So it's like we never really know at any point that he's telling the truth in this movie. Yvette, the French maid, we find out is actually not at all a French maid, but she works for Miss Scarlet. She's one of her escorts, and she's putting on the accent. And you see when she dies, she passes away. No, she just gets murdered. You see, she comes in, she's like, oh, it's you. I thought it was you. And she's talking to her, and she loses the French accent, then gets killed. So it's interesting to see how like all these characters are harboring secrets. What was Mrs. Peacock's thing? She was a senator's wife, and was he on the take or she was on the take?
Yeah, one of them was on the take. Oh, now you're asking me to remember all the secrets of the movie I just watched, and I'm not going to be able to tell you.
So Mrs. Peacock was on the take, either her or her senator husband. Miss Scarlet runs a high-end escort service for politicians. Miss Colonel Mustard
was a war profiteer.
I'm like, wasn't one of them a communist?
Plum was sexually abusing younger patients, or just patients. I think it was younger patients.
It seemed that it was younger women. Mr. Green was a homosexual, which in 1958 was probably still illegal.
Yeah,
which blows my mind.
Yeah.
But then maybe we find out in one of the endings that he wasn't, and he's just an undercover FBI agent.
Yeah.
Yvette was a prostitute. The Mr. Body was actually possibly the butler's butler, and the butler wasn't actually a butler.
But he buttles regardless. He buttles regardless. All right, I gotta share this fun fact.
So. Oh, and Mrs. White killed all of her husbands.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
So this is the benefit of having a live studio audience. So if you are not in the live studio audience, you can always join us 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, and you can leave all of your direct feedback, and you can correct the mistakes we make. And like Paul, you can share additional fun facts. So Paul says, after a disastrous performance in 1981 on Saturday Night Live, Lee Ving and his band Fear were banned for life from the show by Lorne Michaels. This is sad news, Paul. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and go ahead.
Some people got. It's funny. I admit, now my brain is like communists, Nazis. I'm like, somebody got banned on SNL by Lorne Michaels for tearing off their costumes. It was a band. Who were they? I can't remember.
Paul, you'll have to fact check us for what other bands?
American band. So they showed up on stage in Nazi costumes, like in SS costumes. It was
not good. Yeah, not good.
It was supposed to be a social commentary on, I can't remember what. They're an American band. boys and girls. One of the wives was from Montreal, and they were based out of Montreal for a while. Can't remember who.
Well, we've given you all a mission, except everyone
Not boys.
everyone needs to figure out the answer to this while we continue with our review, except for Sherry, who has not yet seen this movie. She's number 5. So you need to just stop watching this episode and go and watch the movie, and so that you can come back and tell us how much you love it. And if you don't like it, don't tell us, because we'll be really sad. No, we'll be sad. I'll be sad. You can tell Nat, but I'll be sad. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is true. Susan says IMDb is fantastic for quick movie facts. Yeah, I feel like it was a couple of episodes ago where I discovered, and maybe you all know this already because you're much more clever than me, but if you watch these movies on Amazon Prime, there is a little button, and I found it on my TV, so now I don't only have to do this on my iPad or computer, but there's a little button called X-ray. You're all like, obviously, Katie, we've been doing this for forever. But if you press X-ray, you can actually like click up and get additional facts. So like it normally just shows you like the cast that are in the scene when you pause. But if you go over to the X-ray button and then you click trivia, it shows you all of the trivia in the movie, and it will go to the exact scene where the trivia is, which is really fun while you're watching it, because there's like moments where, there's like inconsistencies in the movie, like in the case of this one where the gun is still smoking because the scene originally was that he shot her, but then they edited it afterwards. So it's fun. It makes it, if you're able to watch it on Amazon, I know not all of the movies are available necessarily there, but it is a fun bonus. And who knows, maybe it exists on the other players as well, but I enjoyed it. It was not possible in the VHS days. So we used to have like trivia books or know all the details by, I don't know, being like completely obsessive. Or I guess watching like all of the like behind the scenes interviews with all the cast, which I mean, not that they're less common now, but I think there's just so many resources now, especially with sites like IMDb out there.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out the band.
We'll wait. Go ahead.
It's like not there. Doc gave us a couple of people that were
The Germs and Rage Against the Machine and Cypress Hill.
Not either of them. No. American band based in Montreal.
No, you're gonna have to follow up. It's gonna drive Nat crazy.
Like Lumineers. It's not the Lumineers. Arcade Fire. It was Arcade Fire.
Arcade Fire. There you go. What were you doing, Arcade Fire? Why? Why?
Like,
and why leaving? You have such a fantastic name, and you were Mr. Body. You should not have done something so silly. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, we've reached the time of the show where anyone that's in the live studio audience who hasn't already expressed all of their love for this movie can drop in the amount of stars we prefer potatoes that you would give this movie. The answer is 5 or 6 or 8 or a field of potatoes or a potato. There's no potato plantation. Potato farm.
A field of taters.
A field of taters. Come on, Tater Tots. Let us know what you think of the movie, and we will take your feedback into consideration.
It was one of the movies that I knew I loved as a kid. I loved when I was older, and I was rewatching it now, and it's like, I haven't seen it in quite a while. I'm like, I hope it's as funny as I remember, because sometimes things aren't. And I was like, oh, it's even funnier than I remember it being. I laughed so much watching this. It's definitely sort of a laughing out loud kind of laugh too.
Yeah, I think the funny part is, and this is true for a lot of movies, but I especially hit hard with this one, was that there were lines in this that I have memorized, like I just say without even realizing I'm saying out loud. And at the time that I was watching it, they made probably very little to no sense to me as a kid. And yet, and like listening to my kids say the lines, I'm like, they have no idea what they're saying. Like there's a line in this movie that goes, communism is just a red herring. And I was like, communism is a red herring. And I had I maybe knew what generally communism was, and maybe generally understood what a red herring was, but I together had no context as to what they were really saying. And
the communists had red coats at one point in history, but
exactly. So it's too funny. Like, just like you said, just watching it back again, where you're like, wow, like it's the energy and the enthusiasm, and in many cases the ad-libbing that this cast did is what makes this movie so
And
brilliant.
the physicality.
The
I have to say
physicality of it.
the physical comedy
Yep.
of most all of the actors in this.
Yeah.
Mrs. Peacock, her screaming, her thrashing around Tim Curry, his falling, his tripping, his pretending he's dead, his all just Tim Curry.
Yeah.
Like they're everything from the physical comedy to the quick wit, the even just how fast they talk sometimes in this.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even like lip sync it. Like there's no way I could say it or repeat it while reading it. Like
Yeah.
they're so fast. It was enjoyable on many levels, and again, like you were saying, I remember enjoying it so much as a kid, and I love that your kids watching it now had the same reactions that we did when we were kids. I asked Katie, the first thing asked her today, she's like, oh, I watched it with the kids. Like, did they find the singing telegram bit like really funny? Because when we were little, we thought that was the funniest thing ever. We used to do that all the time.
It was like, it's still somewhere like in the back of my mind that comes up randomly. Like it'll be the middle of the workday and I'm like, I am a singing telegram. And then I just laugh for like a good 10 minutes. I'm just like, oh, it's hilarious. It's always funny. Like it's just always funny. I'm loving the reviews are in, everyone. Paul gave it, I don't even know how many. That's more than 5. That's lots of potatoes. Susan also is up there in the 5 category. Doc is just choosing different things to rate it. He's doing it wrong. He's got candles. He's got, I don't know what those are. Red herrings, maybe. Maybe those are red herrings. He's got some wrenches, but all positive ratings.
It's all the weapons.
Susan's changing hers to weapons. Doc's changing his to water guns. But all top ratings. All right. Well, no surprise for us. We're over here in the. Oh, we lost our sound effects. I gotta turn my sound effects on. Hang on, you guys. One sec. We gotta. Oh, no. You know what? Muting it doesn't do it. We're gonna have technical difficulties tonight. Okay, here we go. Ready? 1 sec. We're going this way.
George is giving us all the taters too.
There we are. Now you hear it if you're listening to the show. You're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. For those listening and not watching, the ding noise is potatoes dropping down from above. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Christian taters for this one. Probably really should have been like more of them, but you know.
Yeah.
We'll stick to our rating system for this one. But yeah, robes. We've George is in as well with 5 potatoes. Yeah, and Sherry hasn't seen it yet, but she's up there. She's already thinks it's 5 potatoes, and Val, who we adore, says that she's gonna take Paul's 6 potatoes and raise a steak. So you know, we're there. Nice. It's a whole dinner. It's a whole potato and steak dinner. This is a great meal of a movie. A lot of fun, and this is our unofficial end to spooky season, and in between before Nat lets me do all holiday movies. So, yeah. So I'm excited.
I will be good. There are some Christmas movies that I very much enjoy.
Yeah, but we got to keep them in the season. We have this in-between time. And if you're joining us next week, which you absolutely should, we're on our game. We're scheduled 2 weeks out just to confuse Nat. So she's now already ready for next week. She had next week's movie already watched, all of the notes ready, thinking it was tonight. Yeah. So we threw her for
I prepped for the wrong movie today. But then we
threw her for a loop.
In record time prepped for this one.
Yes. So next week we will be talking about Con Air. And we're bringing on special guest Hank, one of our tater tots. I'm going with the name, guys. Tater tots. Hank is one of our tater tots. He's going to join us. It's one of his favorite movies. I have not yet rewatched it. I don't remember if I like it. I know I've seen it. I know I love John Cusack, and Nicolas Cage is just ridiculous. So I think
before rewatching it, I remember it's not a good movie.
It's not a good movie.
But sorry, everybody saw it. It was. It was iconic. It is iconic in the fact that it was just that 90s action, nonsensical action, Nick Cage era. It's fantastic, but so bad.
Yeah.
So and not poorly acted or done. Just
ridiculous. Just ridiculous. And Val is saying she loves Con Air. Yeah, it's going to be... It's going to be interesting because it's going to be really hard to rate because this is one of those ones that we'll probably give 5 because we just give 5 to everything. That's how this show goes. But it's not, I don't think it's a good movie.
Like who got the script and was like, I'm John fucking Cusack. Yeah, let's sign me up, bub. This sounds amazing.
Sign me up. He was probably like, you know what? I'm in a movie with Nicolas Cage.
All-star
Why
cast.
not? Why not?
He was famous before Nick Cage.
Uh,
No, they came up around the same time, but
Susan says, which I think is true. It's one of Nick Cage's better movies. I don't even fully remember it. And I believe that to be true.
It was one of his better movies, but he's also been in mostly terrible
so many movies. So many movies. Yeah.
He's got a charm, guys. He's got a charm that we all just sort of... Is it because the Coppolas made us love him, or is it just because, like, did he buy our love? Or do we just love him because he's so charming and strange?
Well, it may not be for next week when we hang out with Hank, but a future episode where we do Face Off, which is my favorite Nicolas Cage movie. We absolutely need to, if we don't bring on our friends Sarah and Scott, we at least need to have them send in a photo of their Nicolas Cage pillowcases, because they have those, because we bought them for them, and they love Nick Cage, and they have these like creepy Nick Cage pillowcases. So if you're a fan of Nick Cage, next week and following episodes you're going to be all in on those ones. It should be a lot of fun. But hey, thanks for hanging out with us for Clue, because it was so fun to rewatch it, and we've checked it off our list. If you want to see our never ending, thousands of movies long list, we've been like filling it out as we do the episodes. We drop the link in, so if you're like, have they done this episode, this is a good reference point. You can see it down here in the show notes or description. If you look just down wherever you're watching it, you should be able to see our movie list, and so you can let us know if we're missing one on the list, and then you can go back and see if we've already done your episode. We've gotten a lot of asks to redo Pump Up the Volume, Nat, so we might have to not that we did a bad job, just people so love that movie, which makes me just happy inside that they want more review. So yeah, we might have to do more review.
I'm always excited to watch Christian Slater do anything on screen.
Yeah. We need, given that Christian Slater is our mascot, is like head of the Tater Tot Spuds. We should do some more Christian Slater movies. We're missing out. We're missing out. All right. Well, until next week, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for listening and sharing and following and subscribing and all of those amazing things. Leave a review, tell a friend, come hang out in our live studio audience, 9 p.m. Thursday nights Eastern on YouTube. And we will see you next week for Con Air with Hank. Should be good.
Yay.
Bye,
everyone. Go play Clue, guys.
Go play Clue. Go watch the movie. We're looking at you, Sherry. Go watch that movie. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Wait. We got to come back. We got to come back. We've been calling you Sherry. I need a sad face sound effect. I only have happy ones. Yeah, I only have happy ones, like triangles and stuff. I don't. Here, pretend that's a sad sound. Sherry's name isn't Sherry. We're dumb. It's pronounced Shuri. Shuri, we're sorry. And thanks for hanging out with us.
I love that.
Wait, now I may be saying it wrong again. Shuri, you'll have to let us know. But we're so appreciative that you came by tonight, and thank you for letting us know the correct pronunciation of your name. Nothing drives me crazier than when people mispronounce my name, so I'm all in. I'm all in for this extra ending. Yeah, Nat gets it all the time.
I have an English name in a French city, so it's never right. They even misspell my name because they're just like, it's obviously not French. We'll just switch letters around and make it French. I live here, my choice. But Cherie, we're sorry, and I love the pronunciation of your name.
We're so...
That's really nice.
It is really nice.
Gorge.
All right, well, on that note, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.